Hello, welcome everyone to the Guidelines and Principles webinar series with the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands. The Guidelines and Principles covers legal compliance and best practices. I see we have a question already. If you can't hear our audio through your computer, you'll want to use your phone to get audio. I can give you the phone number right now if it isn't already on your screen. It's 866-740-1260, and I'm going to send it out on a chat because I realize you probably can't hear me if you're asking that question. Okay. The Guidelines and Principles covers legal compliance and best practices in all areas of nonprofit management and operations. And we've built a website, as you can see on the splash screen, called guidelinesandprinciples.org, which offers compiled research, sample documents, and other resources for all areas of management and operations. And we have online assessments that can provide customized action plans and sort of prioritize things infrastructurally for you. So we encourage you to visit that website, and you'll find more information related to planning, which is what we're going to discuss today. My name is Todd, and this month we're exploring planning with Bob Culver of Culver Consulting, who's going to guide us through the Playbook, a streamlined and actionable planning document for nonprofits. Before I hand the reins over to Bob, I want to orient you to the webinar format. We'd love for you to participate. There will be a number of opportunities, and one is for you to ask questions throughout the presentation if you require more clarification. And so you'll notice on the bottom left side of your screen that there's a chat feature. I'll be facilitating the chat function and sort of taking in the questions, and when Bob finds a good moment during his presentation to pause, we'll address some of those questions and make sure that we're addressing all the issues that you'd like to cover. So there will also be a couple of sort of brief polls so that Bob can get a better idea of who's out there and what kind of role you might be playing and in the planning processes at your organizations. So all of the questions through the chat feature and in the polling are anonymous, so we encourage you to participate. And so with that, I'm going to, one other thing, we are recording today's conversation, and so just be aware of that, and it'll be available on our website afterwards for if you want to share it with some of your coworkers or colleagues. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the reins over to Bob, and I present to you Bob Culver. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate being here. Thanks, all of you, for coming virtually to our class today. We appreciate that also very much. And there's people from literally all over Nebraska and Iowa and even beyond our state, so we appreciate you all attending today. So let me just start by talking a little bit about myself so you can get a little bit of context about who I am. Currently, I'm literally in the last month of working for Lincoln Financial Group. I'll be leaving Lincoln at the end of February to start my Culver Consulting Group. But at Lincoln, I was in charge of strategic planning for the group business for many years. And prior to that, I was in the healthcare business and have done strategic planning for many non-for-profit organizations also right here in Omaha. So I've had a lot of experience from that perspective. And then the other perspective I think is going to be relevant or maybe helpful to all of you today is that I've served on many, many boards. And so I've got that perspective as a board member as well as a consultant. And so hopefully what we're talking about today will be very relevant for for you. So in terms of the agenda, this is kind of how it's going to lay out. We're going to talk a little bit about the objective of doing the webinar around planning. We're actually going to visit the traditional planning process a little bit so that we have context around that. And then kind of what is a playbook? And then what are some of the key components of the playbook? And then we actually will have a template where we can show you how it works. And then if you think it's helpful, you can request getting that sent to you so that you can use it in your own organization. So that's kind of how the agenda is going to roll today. We're going to have a couple of polls like Todd said up front to learn a little bit more about you. But also please feel free to contact us via the chat. So let's move on. So objective, non-for-profit organizations, I mean, all of you, at least I would think most of you, I've looked at some of the list of who's attending today. You guys have very limited resources. And so when you get down to a real traditional strategic planning process, it can be very difficult to kind of spend time doing that and still doing your day job. And so serving on, like I said, boards, I've noticed that's always been kind of problematic, or we finally do a strategic plan and then we don't really kind of revisit it because it never ever kind of manifested into something that was necessarily actionable in a short-term point of way. So the point I wanted to make about that is that you do need a plan. I mean, so this is not about not doing strategic planning. This is about taking a look at strategic planning and seeing if there's a way that you can do it and fit it in to your daily operations, because that's where the relevance comes into view. So if you're not doing it on a daily basis, if you're not executing on those strategies, then really it's not doing you any good. So first thing we're going to do here is have a poll. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, Todd, you want to handle the poll?
Yeah, the first thing we want to know is, in what capacity are you engaged in a nonprofit organization? Please check all that apply. Some of you might be all of these, so let us know.
This is where we have the interaction, folks.
Mm-hmm. We want to know who you are so we can make the presentation relevant.
Oh, here we go. People are doing it. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Give everyone just a few more seconds to respond. Great. Okay. Go ahead and,
Okay, and here comes the results. And it looks like, well, 62% staff, but we have board members. We have people from all over the different roles, so that's great. So I'm going to try to talk about it from a couple of different ways, and I'm going to be sensitive to all of you board members out there because I do have some pretty strong opinions about that also, so we'll be sharing that. Okay, Todd?
Okay, the next thing we want to know is whether your organization has a strategic plan or not. Just to remind you, all of your responses are anonymous. We won't be able to tie any of your responses back to you, so feel free to answer openly.
Nor would we want to.
Nor would we want to, yeah.
All right.
Okay, looks good.
All right, 7% of you say you have a strategic plan, so that's great. So that's the first part. So like I said before, you need to have a plan. So now we're going to talk about, is there a way that we can make this more relevant to your daily operations? It's kind of where our focus would be. And those that 23.5% of you that don't have a strategic plan, then maybe this playbook can help you get a strategic plan in more of a simple way. So let's just move on to our next
Okay, our final polling question is, now that we know that 70% of you have a strategic plan, we'd like to know how often you engage in strategic planning.
Almost everybody's responded. All right, let's see what the results say. Well, it's kind of like a reality TV going on right now. No prizes, though. All right, every 2 years, 43% of you said every 2 years, and then a tie for every 5, and then a lot I don't know. So I think what we're seeing here is kind of some of the problematic issues around having a strategic plan is that it's one of those things that you got to kind of fit into everything else. So really the premise of today is how can we do something that really does fit in? How can we do something so it's not that strategic planning doesn't become an event, that strategic planning really becomes something that's alive, something that goes through your organization as you move forward. So that's what we're going to kind of try to get to today.
I think something that will be especially relevant about the playbook is that we're going to look at something that isn't going to take up all of your organizational resources, and it isn't going to take a year. Sometimes you hear about strategic planning processes taking anywhere from 3 months to a year, and if you're engaged in strategic planning every 2 years, you'd be in a perpetual state of planning.
Absolutely. In fact, in terms of strategic planning, like I said, I've been involved with strategic planning for actually the first time I was involved was probably over 30 years ago, and I was working with Arthur Little and McDonnell Douglas, some of the big strategic planning consultants, and it took the hospital that I worked with. It took us a whole year to do strategic planning. Every department had a binder. But the fact of the matter is that by the time we got done, it was kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. By the time you're done, you got to paint it again. And so the relevance of it, I remember being very frustrated in terms of how it could really be an active part of what we were trying to do. So let's just start by talking about traditional strategic planning. So this is the definition I think is pretty good. A systematic process of envisioning a desired future, translating this vision to broadly defined goals or objectives, and then a sequence of steps to achieve them. So that's pretty simple, and I think that's really what we got to keep in mind. The product is not the document. The product is really having clarity around what your organization and where your organization's going. So breaking that down, so the components usually, and we're going to talk about each one of these, but these are kind of the components that you'll find yourself addressing. The vision and mission, that inevitable, how can we get a slogan that tells everybody who we are? We're going to talk about my particular opinion around vision and mission. And then situation analysis, what's happening from a marketing point of view, what's happening from a financial point of view, operating point of view. All of those have to be taken into consideration. Internal and external opportunities and challenges. That's usually how we move forward. Either there's a great opportunity in the not-for-profit world, it usually has to do with maybe a capital campaign or some funding or some new program that you bring in. And then the other thing around that is challenges. So like when the market collapsed, I think the non-for-profit world suffered very early in that collapse back in 2008. And then you got your goals and objectives and strategies, and I know that we all talk about what's a goal, what's an objective, what's a strategy, and the fact of the matter, it's really down to, and we'll talk about this also, but it's really kind of like what's the general thing that we got to get done, and then what's our approach to that, and then what kind of action do we need to have to accomplish that. And then obviously resources. Resources are huge, and so it's one thing to have a strategic plan and dream big, but it's another thing to have the resources, obviously, to make that all happen. Then we talk about specific actions, and then lastly, there's always a measurement. So what's the metrics around a strategic plan being successful? So the first thing I like to do is kind of give you Bob's world and opinions. These are all kind of built on my experiences. In fact, we've had quite a conversation here at NAM around this issue, as well as some of my colleagues that are serving on boards in Omaha. But my opinion, and I feel very strongly about this, is that any executive director was hired to further the organization's mission and, by default, owns the development and implementation of a plan. So I think many times, if you're an executive director or even a strong board, that someone that a lot of times it's felt like the board should be doing the planning process. And I really believe that it's actually the exact opposite. So my second bullet is first planning effort, a draft should be internal. It should be done by the executive director and the staff. The staff should be involved all the way. And it's because, you know why? Because staff knows what's needed and possible, and we know that, back to our polling, that there's a good many of you that are staff that have joined us today. And I think a lot of times I've been on boards where we bring in a facilitator, the executive director, maybe a couple of key people, and the board all get together and they start laying out a strategic plan. And I've always thought that was just kind of backwards because we don't really know what the reality is. We don't know what we're up against. We don't know what everyone's opinions are. So I really believe that the first draft really needs to come from the internal. Now, obviously, the board's input is necessary. And I think that can be done in a lot of different ways. But I think it has to be intentional and it has to be at the right time. So a board, like any other key stakeholder, and you'll have others, I mean, in my opinion, your clientele also need to be involved in terms of at least their opinions. But I think that the board can be involved early on, but I do think it has to be intentional, and I think it has to be in context. Not that they can't bring something else to the table.
Now, without diving too deeply into a governance question, some boards have planning committees. At what point and at what level do you see them participating, initiating the planning process?
Well, good question. Thanks, Todd, for bringing that up. In my mind, the Strategic Planning Committee, their job is not to initiate the plan. Their job is to support the executive director and bring the resources necessary to put a plan together. So in my opinion, it still gets down to the staff and executive director kind of laying out at least some broad parameters and context about what they think that the organization should be doing. In my mind, the strategic planning staff brings maybe some financial expertise, maybe some governance expertise, maybe some marketing expertise, so that you do have the resources kind of to vet it out. So many times, if you have a good strategic planning committee, that could be a group that could be involved fairly early on, like I mentioned here. And then also an outside facilitator, I think, is always helpful because I think it challenges your thoughts and it makes sure that you're not in like a group think and that you're really seeing that there's opportunities maybe beyond what you imagine. So both of those could be helpful. But the bottom line in my mind is that and none of this is available, that should not stop you from putting together a good plan. And I think that's what we're trying to talk about today is how simple can a plan be? How easy can we make this process so that it's relevant to the organization? Did I answer your question, Tom?
It did.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Now, we're not seeing any questions from our attendees yet, so feel free to use that chat box and send in a question. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the basic premise of a playbook. So the basic premise, and I guess I'll stop for a second. The playbook actually is nothing that I developed. It was actually something that we used at Lincoln Financial. Lincoln Financial has always had a strategic planning process. It's an annual process. We're always looking out 3 years, so every year we go back and we look out another 3 years, and then we also take a look at how we did the year before, and then we recast the plan. So strategic planning at Lincoln Financial, which is a very huge corporation, it's a Fortune 200, but it's integral to them making sure that we're moving forward and doing things that will be profitable and good for everybody involved. So the playbook was something that we used almost like a reporting tool back to the CEO on a quarterly basis. And when I saw us using that, and when I was involved with it, I really realized that this might work really well in the not-for-profit world as a simpler plan. And so I introduced it to many of the organizations here in Omaha, and it's worked very well, I think, for them. I think that there's some good testimony around how that made strategic planning relevant. But the idea here is the basic premise of a playbook is to just kind of simplify the plan into the most important things. So there's kind of a prioritization process. And those things that we kind of focus on are tied directly to all the stakeholders. And we'll talk more about how you segment your stakeholders. Because if you've segmented your stakeholders and you have clarity around the organization's direction of where they're going, which I would call a positioning statement, if you have those two things, then building strategies around where you're going, I think, will work a lot better. And then we do it in a PowerPoint template. Now, that seems like it might be a minor issue, but the cool thing is, number one, it allows you to do a lot of things visually, but more importantly, then your strategic plan can also be presented as a PowerPoint deck, or it can actually be projected, it can be emailed. So again, it's just some logistic things that really make the playbook relevant. So that's why I introduced it as a playbook, as a PowerPoint template.
I think that's a fantastic idea in terms of having the most flexible format, because you can think of a number of contexts in which you would want to present either the elements of your plan or the measurable outcomes of your plan, progress you're making on your plan, and you might need to do it very quickly.
Yep.
So.
Now, I think we have a question here.
Yeah, Treva Hogard asks, I'm sorry, I forgot we were going to be anonymous with our questions. That's the last time I'll identify someone asking the question. I apologize. What are your thoughts on a past board member facilitating the strategic planning process?
My intuition and gut tells me that's not a great idea, but I suspect that there's some past board members that might be very good at that too. So I wouldn't talk in specifics, but in general, maybe a better way of answering the question is, my concern would be, are they locked into things coming from the past, or this is the way we always did it, or this worked in the past, where they start interjecting themselves into the process. I think that's what you're going to kind of have to take a look at. If they're really good facilitators, then the fact of the matter, them being a past board member, the only value there would be that they'd be familiar with the organization. But if they're good facilitators, then they would rise above what my concerns would be. But I would be very careful about that, about what their impact might be. Sometimes it's not even something that's obvious. It's just the fact that other board members all of a sudden feel uncomfortable because this person might have been involved with the organization during a time of stress or maybe a time of opportunity. And so there could be some dynamics there, some intangibles maybe that I would certainly take a look at and be careful of. I think being a facilitator is one of those jobs that either people really get it or they don't, and it's walking a very fine line. They really need to be able, on one hand, be very objective so that they keep the conversation in a good way, but at the same time they have to maybe have a little bit of pushiness, I would say, to make sure that the process is moving forward.
So in terms of, if you do decide to go with a facilitator, what you might be looking for is really a particular skill set rather than a particular level of engagement with the individual organization, whether it be in the past or, they don't necessarily have to have a passion for the organization, right, or anything. They just need to they have to have a particular facilitating skill set.
That's right, and they have to be committed to what the process that you want. So I mean, the process, like in a playbook, it might be something that's a little bit simpler than it would be in a big strategic planning meeting. Yeah, exactly, that was well said. Thanks for your question. Can I recommend some facilitators which are local to Omaha? Trevor, why don't you just send me an email after the session? I'll be happy to do that. There's many, I think, good facilitators in Omaha, so I'll be happy to do that. Okay, Playbook Formula. Now, this is actually a problem-solving formula that I learned back when I was young, and you can tell that was probably a long time ago. But anyway,
state of mind.
Yeah, exactly. State of mind. So anyway, but this Playbook Formula is actually, it's if you boil down any planning process you're going to get down to these 5 things. So whether you're solving a problem in your organization or putting together a strategic plan, if you've addressed these 5 things, you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. And they are identification, analysis, development, implementation, and evaluation. And that's kind of in a chronological way, but not necessarily chronological, but in a very methodical way. And then if you thought about it as a circle, as you end up in evaluation, that's when you would circle back and go back and recast it if you were doing a strategic plan, for example, on a regular basis. But this is our basic formula that we're going to be working from. So let's take them apart and look at them individually. So identification, what does that mean? And this is where we're going to get into this conversation around vision and mission. But identification means clarity. It means really understanding who you are, what your organization is, and where are you going, and who's involved. Who are the key stakeholders? So it usually pops up in a vision or mission statement and or a positioning statement. And whatever you choose to call it, it's from all audience perspectives. You really need to understand your clientele, you need to understand your staff in that, you need to address the board. There's going to be one-off key stakeholders that play to your organization. You need to take all of those into consideration when you're putting together your vision and mission statement, because it's got to be relevant. It's got to be something where people really feel like they connect to it.
Now, Bob, in conversations we've had about the playbook, the positioning statement seems to be an area where you really start to, while it contains key elements of a traditional vision or mission, statement in a traditional planning process, this is where you start to part ways a little bit, because the positioning statement is it's longer
yes.
to start with. It's a little more involved, and you're trying to express things that require more language.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what might be in a positioning statement as opposed to a traditional mission statement?
Absolutely. So a positioning statement actually has its background in marketing, and for all of those who have maybe studied the history of not-for-profit marketing, the name Philip Kotler will be a name that you'll recognize. Mr. Kotler teaches at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern, and he came up with the concept of positioning statement, and then Michael Porter from Harvard built on it. But it was primarily originally used from a marketing point of view. My using it in strategic planning actually was my idea way back when, and because I really felt that vision and mission statements sometimes we worked so hard on making them short that we lost context as to what we're really about. And I'll show you an example of a positioning statement in a minute. So in my mind, a positioning statement should be that longer elevator speech that anybody that would read a positioning statement would have a pretty good idea of who you are, where you came from, the who, what, where, why, where you're going, and how you're doing that. What are the points of differentiation that your organization has versus a similar organization that really makes a powerful message out to the people that you want to talk to? So that would be how I would answer that question, Todd. Points of differentiation is truly a marketing term, and it's probably one of the hardest things to get to is because if you're a hospital, then you have patient care, and you have nurses, and you have doctors, and we're trying to provide the best patient care, blah, blah, blah. But the fact of the matter is the point of differentiation would probably be maybe by product. We do a better job at cancer, or cancer research. Or if you're in the Human Services Agency, we take care of people in North Omaha better than this organization because we concentrate on youth and you concentrate on adults. It's all those things that make you a little bit different that potential funders, potential clientele are going to be looking for so that they can attach meaning to your organization.
And those are things you're not always going to find in a mission statement.
Exactly.
And you can find a lot of nearly identical mission statements when in fact there are major points of differentiation between organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the other really key part of the identification phase that in the same conversation is audience or stakeholder segmentation. when I've been involved, like I said, with many not-for-profits, and when we talk about who are we serving, we have a tendency to talk in very broad language because we don't want to exclude. Well, the fact of the matter is, if you haven't really targeted down to exactly who your audiences are, whether they're your funding segment, your clientele segment, or your business segment that you want potential board members to come from, if you haven't really laid all of those different segments out, then I don't see how you could probably get the relevance that you need back to the positioning statement, because you're trying to be everything for everybody.
This might be something you'll address down the road here, but one of the reasons that mission statements are encouraged to be so broad is to allow for a certain level of flexibility. How does a positioning statement, does it still allow for the flexibility that you want the organization to have as it continues in strategic thinking? And
this isn't to necessarily take the place of a mission statement or a vision statement. But if I have my choices, I'd spend time on the positioning statement. But usually, from the positioning statement, if you've really done it well, you can actually probably come up with a mission or a vision statement out of that if you feel like you need to have that shorter message. But I would not start there. I would start with the positioning statement, and then if you feel the need to have the other, to have a mission or a vision statement. I think a mission statement is probably closer to a positioning statement than a vision is. In my mind, a vision statement is a little bit more of a future thinking. It's a little bit more from a marketing point of view. But anyway, that's my opinion, and I think a lot of organizations have used positioning statements well. I'm on the BEMAS board for contemporary art. We came up with the positioning statement, I think, like 6 or 7 years ago. And even though we've done different strategic plans, it helped us remember who we were. That the fact of the matter is our number one thing that we do is a residency program for artists. We do exhibits. We have an outreach program. And every time we get new board members, it allowed us to orient them. So we had that consistency. So we wouldn't kind of get derailed doing this or doing that. And it's really kind of kept us on track. And other organizations have used them also. So let's take a look at one.
Great.
So I'm going to show you the positioning statement from the Friends of Eppley Cancer Center. They had me facilitate a retreat last year with them because they've been around a long time, but they had new members and they weren't sure that they were still relevant. There was other organizations involved supporting a new cancer center, and so they really felt like they had to get grounded again. So the first thing we did that day was we put together a mission positioning statement. So, here I highlighted the key things about it for over 40 years, so it's important that you know that this organization's been around for 40 years. If you didn't have that in there, then you would wonder, is this a new organization? What are they doing? But the 40 years, that really gives them some credibility that they've been doing this for a long time. Our volunteers have been a voice to the local and regional community. That was their primary job, was to be a liaison, a voice between the cancer center and the community. And then an important fundraising arm, so that becomes another piece of that. So then you drop down, and what are the other things we do secondary to the voice and the fundraising? We educate and promote. And what's the point of differentiation? The center itself has a recognized reputation in specific cancer studies, including. So then we get the points of differentiation. So Friends of Eppley Cancer Center means something specific to the organization that they're supporting versus a cancer center somewhere else. And then lastly, we're passionate and we volunteer for this work, so that you kind of know right now that it's all made up of volunteers and that's okay. So this was a positioning statement that really helped them really redefine their identity and make sure that their relevance was still there. So this is an example of what I'm talking about here.
So if you were to start from here, for example, and you provide some historical context for your organization, you dial in on your target, maybe be it a social problem or a demographic of people or a particular illness that you're trying to address, and then the why you're doing that. Where would you go from here then? Well, I guess my real question is, it seems like a positioning statement over a simple one-sentence mission or a series of value statements might lend itself more readily to measurable, developing some kind of measurable outcomes or some action items.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in order to move forward, you need to know where it came from. And so that means that you have to be able to have something that's managed and measured. And sometimes it's tangible, and sometimes it's not. But a positioning statement, in my mind, really does give you those specifics that allow you to really kind of know where you're going and I mean, from this point, you really can kind of see how the next thing you want to do is come up with some objectives moving forward. You know, that it'll be a lot easier when you know this. So you can really kind of, so what are we doing specifically in education? What are we doing specifically in fundraising? And then start breaking those down into your objectives and your strategies.
You know, I know boards spend time worried about whether there's mission drift, and so does staff and so do executive directors, and especially if you know, if you're extremely busy and you're sort of putting out fires on a day-to-day basis and trying to stay in line with the strategic plan, you're always going to come back and ask yourself, are the things that we're doing in line with our mission? And so a positioning statement might help you answer that question more easily than a single sentence.
Yeah, that would be my opinion. You know, I think the other thing that happens is that, and I'm saying this as a board member, but I think a lot of times we come on the board and we might have a big idea, or we might have this, or this worked for me. And a lot of times I think board influence can also derail the process. And so if you have a positioning statement, it really helps you keep the board members on track. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change it. You know, so if there was some kind of consensus about, hey, this hasn't been working, we have some financial challenges, I think we really need to go a different direction, then going back to the positioning statement and say, so what does that mean to us? How are we going to change that would still make sure that we were relevant to the people that we've promised relevance to, but at the same time grow or change our programming. So in my mind, it's that foundation that you really build off of, even if you're doing some change work.
Excellent.
So that's kind of the identification phase in a nutshell. So let's move on to analysis. Now, analysis is where a lot of times the strategic plan gets really bogged down, because everyone can dig in, and all of a sudden you start finding things, you dig and you find things, dig, and pretty much you've got a lot of data, but you don't know quite what to do with it. So in my opinion, yes, you need analysis, but you need it for context. So it's not how much, it's not a quantitative or how much data you can put together, but what are some of the key things that are either in our way or that they're opportunities. So they could be financial, and it could be operating. So it's really important, especially I think financially, because that's probably the most important thing for anybody in a not-for-profit, because you do rely sometimes on unearned income. But having an understanding of where you came from, what those trends are, so that you really know that if you're really going to bump up and change your programs, you really know kind of what the impact is financially. So I think doing a good financial analysis of where you've been and where you think you're going is a very important part of it. Operating analysis, benchmarks. I mean, all of you work within industries that are pretty unique, and I think you can find benchmarks of what you should be doing. There's all kinds of ratios out there in terms of how much fundraising you need to do to support a certain amount of staff, or how much fundraising you need to do to support certain kind of programs. So I think that's really important to capture and have available. I don't think it always has to be written down in some formal way, but the process of thinking and the process of going through that analysis, I think, is really important.
I've got a question coming in about the financial analysis, and are we talking about just internal financial analysis, like organizational finances, looking at history, looking at current status, or are we also looking at external trends, economic trends, industry trends? I mean, does financial analysis include, so if you were doing a strategic plan in 2009, would the financial analysis have included some of the external threats like the financial collapse?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's both. I just think the key thing is that you perform the exercise, that you have the conversation, so that when you're building things, when you're getting down to really coming up with new objectives to move the organization forward, that you've had that kind of thought process. Now, this is a great opportunity for the finance committee, for a board to engage in the strategic planning process. So that could be one of their jobs, is to work with, if you have somebody on staff, to work with that staff member and taking a look at what our finances have been, where have been our challenges over a certain part of history. So that'd be a great place for them to be involved.
We have another good question coming in about the financial analysis, and you started to address it in your last statement, which is, who's the best person to conduct the financial and operating analysis? This could be very time-consuming depending on the clarity of the records.
Yeah. I understand the question. I don't know if I have a one answer to that. I have some examples. I know that one organization that I consulted with, they had a major new program that they wanted to do that was very different than what they had done in the past, and we actually went and asked one of the bigger financial organizations if they would donate one of their people to help us do it, because it was going to be outside of what we normally did. So that's one example. The other example is I know that finances and not-for-profit sometimes, like you said, depending on who the volunteer was and et cetera, they can be kind of choppy. I would just do your best job. The key thing here is not to go back and have a great analysis. That's not the objective. The objective is that when you're working on where you want to go, that you have a reality around your finances. So the reality could be simple or it could be complex depending on where you're going. And I think that's probably more important than what you're talking about. I know I kind of danced around the question a little bit, but it's a tough one to answer. But usually some of the financial organizations, I know I have a very close friend who's a CPA that he's been asked many times to donate time coming in just to strategize, not even to go into the records, but just to kind of talk about what might be needed. So sometimes that's all you need to do. But so I think it just depends on how complex your organization is and what are the things that you're thinking that you're going to be doing in terms of going forward strategically.
Yeah, I think that's insightful, because you could spend a lot of time just trying to get the perfect and most robust financial and operational analysis, when really it's supposed to be a means to a larger end, which is a really good plan and to set you on course for affecting your mission.
Yeah.
So maybe a question to ask yourself would be, what are the things that we need to know or want to know in order to put together a good plan? And then it might not seem as daunting.
Well, I think it gets back to the executive director, to be quite honest with you. In my mind, from my perspective, any kind of movement forward with the organization and not-for-profit especially is the fact that you guys are all resource capped. A lot of times you have boards who come from a for-profit world, and they think that you should be running like a for-profit, and that's another one of my pet peeves, is I don't necessarily believe that. I think financially you need to be sound, but the fact of the matter is that it's a little bit different animal. You're not looking at generating a 15% ROE at the end of the year on what you're doing. So in my mind, the executive director really needs to have clarity around the kinds of things that are potentially possible. Because if you're resource strapped and a board member says, I really think we should be looking over here strategically to expand here, there needs to be a real reality check. And I think a lot of times executive directors and staff, because sometimes their board members are also their big funders, they feel obligated to kind of go down some of those paths that might not be really realistic. So I think it's really important for the executive director to really have a good feel, so that early on, when there's discussions around things that are tied to some bigger dreams, that there's also a reality check there.
Another thing I like about incorporating the financial and operating analysis, along with the other assumptions and forces at work on this slide, is that you start getting into other types of planning that sometimes strategic planning doesn't touch. Like you get into your business planning,
yes,
and you start getting into your marketing, and you start pulling together elements of all of those other plans into a single thing. Anyway, and that's another strength I see in the playbook.
Yeah, that's really a good point. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling. I think all of you would agree that have a strategic plan, that you spend this time doing a strategic plan, and then usually because you're strapped and you're putting out daily fires, the plan just doesn't fit into what's going on every day, or maybe one thing does. And so I think that the other thing around strategic plans, I mean, from a practical point of view, a strategic plan should be tied into your operations. I mean, if it's not tied into your operations, then I would question why are you going through the process in the first place. So that's why I like this playbook idea, because at least you have a basic plan that you can relate to on a daily basis or a quarterly basis, maybe is a better way of putting it. Analysis, so we talked about analysis. Let's move on to development. Development is where we come up with objectives, and these objectives could be anything. They could be financial, they could be a growth objective, they could be an expense savings objective, they could be focused on earned and unearned revenue relationship. It could be a marketing, promotion, new improved programs, etc. So defining objectives becomes really important, and I'll show you some examples of what I mean by an objective in a few minutes. But the objective is that broad kind of where do we kind of want to be in a 2 to 3 year time frame. I would not go beyond 3 years, and to be quite honest with you, I try to keep most. If you're a smaller organization, I'd keep them down to a 2-year, something very realistic and tangible. But anyway, in the development process is where you develop the objectives. And then moving on to implementation, because they're kind of tied together, so I'm just going to quickly move on to the next slide and talk about implementation. So implementation is, whoops, one too far, hang on. Technology got away from me. So in implementation, so you got your objective, so this is how I define objectives and strategies. So you got that objective, which is that general direction that you want to go as an organization. The strategies then are the approach. So if it's a financial approach, is it an approach where we're going to expand staff? Is it an approach where we're going to add some programs, or we're going to increase the quality of a program? Those are what I would call the strategy to achieve a general objective that might be that we need to be more sustainable from a earned revenue point of view going forward. So if you had an objective to increase earned revenue, then the strategy would be, what is that general approach that you're going to do to change that? So it might be a new program that is not dependent on unearned revenue. And then the actions, or if you want to call them tactics, either one, but then the actions are really the specifics on how you're going to accomplish those strategies. So that's how I would define all those things. Now, at the same time, it's important to understand what are going to be some of the things that are going to challenge these strategies. So if your strategy was to increase earned income, then one of the challenges might be the fact that people don't understand why you're doing earned income when you're a not-for-profit. So in that challenge, an action or a tactic might be that you need to educate your stakeholders on why you need earned income. So that would be kind of an example of what I'm talking about. And then I think you need to identify the timing that you're going to do this, and then you need to have an ongoing status check, which the playbook actually works very well for.
The one thing I like here, and that I think is worth noting, is that the kinds of challenges and gaps that you're talking about here are different from the kinds of challenges and gaps that you might identify in doing just a SWOT analysis.
Yes. Yeah, what the difference would be, a SWOT analysis usually is a broader, well, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but usually a SWOT analysis is how you kind of start the plan. It goes back to the forces at work and stuff. Now I've done SWOT analysis, and I think that they can be an important process to have a conversation around the organization, especially on a retreat. But with a SWOT analysis, I think this is actually more important because the gaps and issues actually relate to the specific strategy.
And the operation.
And the operation, exactly. So then the final piece of the formula is the evaluation. And the evaluation, I mean, a lot of times boards want metrics, and a lot of times they're financial, and that's great. I mean, you should have that. But at the same time, that doesn't always tell the whole story. So I'm a big believer in qualitative, which is why I put it there first. And qualitative doesn't need to be something fancy where you hire an organization to do a survey. You can do informal or formal feedback. In other words, the executive director can have conversations with key stakeholders. You can have lunch meetings, talk about how's it going. This is what we're doing with the playbook. You bring the playbook to the lunch meeting and say, this is where we're at with things. What do you think? How do you see it? And so it really allows you to get that kind of feedback. And then focus groups. And again, you don't need to have necessarily a formal person do focus groups. You can bring together a group of people or stakeholders and have a informal discussion around where you're going with your plan. Quantitative, of course, you got the metrics, you got the financial, numbers served, et cetera. And then obviously you're meeting deadlines. So that's what the playbook does, in my mind, so well as part of the strategic planning process, is that it shows you exactly where you're at. And if you use it like I would suggest, which means that I would not only use it as a plan, I would also use it for staff meetings, and I'd also use it, for the executive director to update the board maybe on a quarterly basis of where you're at on some of the things that are in the plan. Then that status check really becomes important.
Well, it sounds like we're streamlining a number of things. One is the planning process, and setting the goals and objectives of the organization, both at the high levels and in the sort of the measurable metric, driven goals and objectives. And then you've also got operations incorporated. So you've got operations, and then after that you've got a dashboard,
yes,
which is something that organizations are always struggling to figure out. How do I present what we're doing? How do we show our accomplishments? How do we give status updates to important stakeholders, the board, or strategic partners, or whomever? So right now we're already talking about the integration of a number of things.
Yeah, really a playbook does become a dashboard. I mean, it might not be a one-pager that a lot of people like, but the fact of the matter is it does become a dashboard in itself, probably plus the financial report.
Or at the very least, it's going to provide the fuel and the content that you need to produce a good dashboard or snapshot.
Absolutely. Yep.
Excellent. Well, now we've talked a lot about the theory of the playbook and given some historical context and compared it to the traditional planning process. Are we ready to unveil the playbook?
I think so.
Okay.
Sounds like a good idea. And we did get a question about people keeping notes. We can have a copy of this PowerPoint, so we'll make sure that Todd has a link to it and you can download it so that you can use any of the materials. That's all fine and dandy. So let's take a look at the playbook. Well, the first page of the playbook is obviously the title page. And because it's a PowerPoint, I've done this with lots of organizations. I did it with the State Fair, for an example. The State Fair we put an old photograph of the State Fair at the turn of the century because they were moving out to Grand Island, and we wanted to show the history of it. So on the front page, I would put pictures that describe kind of what your organization is, get back to the positioning statement, and make it kind of fun. So it's something that you really want to read. The one we did for the Museum of Nebraska Art, we put the front of the building on it because it's an historical post office and it means a lot to the people out there in Kearney. So we've had a lot of fun with this. With the Friends of Epley Cancer Center, we put a picture of the new cancer center, the blueprints, so that people knew that the new cancer center was part of our strategy. So I would encourage you to make this, to get creative with your front page. So the second page is the vision, mission, or positioning statement. Now, we've dug into this enough, but you want it in here and you want it front and center. So whatever you end up with, this is where you would put it so that when person who is looking at your playbook, it starts right there with who you are, so that grounds everything, puts everything in context. And then the next page would be the audience and key stakeholders. That way, so that when you're working again, you're using it as a report, people remember who your audiences are, who are the stakeholders, primary and secondary. And obviously, if I was a not-for-profit, at the top of the list, my number one stakeholder would be my clientele that I'm serving. I think in the for-profit world, the corporate America, we've kind of lost that. We start thinking too much about shareholders, and the fact of the matter is that the number one audience, the reason for your existence, should be at the top, front and center.
One thing I think that's interesting here is that when you start talking about segmentation, you're actually talking about marketing strategy.
Exactly. I'm a marketing guy, and so whenever I think that was one of the things that I brought to the strategic planning process is that strategic planning, in my mind, if you think about marketing not as advertising, but in the traditional sense, if you went to Northwestern or University of Nebraska or whatever, if you went and talked to the professor around marketing and said, what's marketing, they would start with probably the definition of anything that has to do with the exchange of goods between an organization and their customer. So that's a very broad term. Advertising then becomes part of the marketing equation. So I've always felt that if you're practicing marketing in the traditional broad way, that you're really probably being very strategic because you're taking all the right things into consideration. So that's from a marketing guy, and I won't apologize for that.
No apology necessary.
Okay, moving on. Then the next thing is listing out your objectives. Now, on objectives, I would keep them down, if you had 3, that'd be fine. If you had 5, that'd be fine. If you start going beyond 5, you got to start looking at what your objectives really are, and are there subcategories, or why would you work? Because I'll be quite honest with you, I would have a hard time meeting 5 objectives. Most companies have a hard time meeting 5 objectives. So my advice is to keep it somewhere between 3 and 5 objectives. You can always, it doesn't mean that because there's not something you want to do is not on the playbook as an objective that you're not doing it. So for an example, if you wanted to maintain a healthy environment for your employees, that might be a great thing, but that's how you operate. That doesn't necessarily need to be an objective. So the objectives really are strategic and looking forward as to what the organization wants to do. Well,
I'm looking at one of your bullet points on this slide, and one of them is new programs. And for a number of nonprofits, there will be multiple programs running concurrently, and each program has maybe a different objective. There might be overlap, or there might be shared resources or shared objectives or what have you, but how do you reconcile keeping your organizational objectives simple while also having multiple programs running at once that are trying to address different needs?
I don't have a simple answer for that, but I will say I probably would look at it from this perspective. You don't need an objective for every program. Just because the program is not mentioned in an objective doesn't mean that the program is not relevant to sustainability or something. However, I suspect that if you've done a good job around your objectives and you start looking at your strategies, that those programs probably are going to more likely show up in a strategy. So for an example, back to the earned income thing. So let's say that the objective is to increase our earned income by 20%. And then you go to the strategy, and one of those programs that used to be totally supported by unearned, all of a sudden maybe you start charging a fee as a strategy for that to a particular audience segment that you haven't reached yet but can't afford a fee. So all of a sudden you have a strategy that fits with a program that's inside that. But don't make it a cascaded effect of everything that you do becomes the objectives. The plan really needs to be focused on where you're going and strategic back. It's not an operational plan. Now, that doesn't say, some people do like to have a business plan or an operation plan. That's a little bit different animal. That really gets into a different thing where you're doing a cost-benefit analysis, or you're really doing some things that are going to make a change in your operations. You might be changing your personnel or something like that. That's not a strategic plan. So I mean, to me, that might be an action or something like that. But don't get caught up in your operations and turning your operations into a strategic plan. So let's get down to the heart of it. And this really becomes kind of almost like we're talking about a dashboard. So simply, this template is not complex, folks. This is me inserting a table into a PowerPoint slide in a specific way. So obviously the name of the organization, and then the objective, and then I used an example. So here the example was focused on an advocacy program. So the strategy, and in yellow is how I would define strategy. So what's the general approach? So the example is develop an existing member retention campaign. And then maybe the gaps and issues is that the membership database hasn't been updated for years. Sound familiar? And then the action is that, maybe the action is not to try to fix the database, but survey existing and lapsed members to identify reasons for staying or leaving, and then developing some strategy off of that. So this shows you how that might work. Now on timing, I really suggest that you do not put in a day or a week that you're going to do this, or maybe even a month. I would deal with quarterly timing deadlines, because again, I know that all the non-for-profits I've been on, big and small, it's tough to keep on track, and you shouldn't feel like you can't move a deadline. So if you keep it within a quarterly status check, which might tie to like a board meeting, and on a board meeting it might even be an annual report. I'm not proposing that you need to do it every quarter. It just depends on your, how you like to operate. But I would make sure that your timing has a lot of flexibility on it, because meeting deadlines is tough, and especially when they're strategic, because you're kind of looking at things that you haven't done before, or things that you're going to be doing that haven't been done before. And so everyone needs to have some flexibility here, including the board.
One thing that I think is notable here is that the thing that is driving the action is an identified gap or an issue or a problem. And I like that model because, on the one hand, it's seeing a gap compels you into action. I think that's in line with how nonprofits come into existence in the first place. You've identified a need or a gap in the community that propelled you into action, and you started an organization. Why not carry that same philosophy into your planning and your operations?
Exactly.
Find the gaps and then propel yourselves into action.
Well put. And I'm going to add one thing to that. This is for all the executive directors that are listening in. The idea is not to make these all green every time you talk to the board. The idea here is to have a reality around how you guys are meeting your plan's needs. I've had clients where we have a meeting getting ready for a board meeting, and they're panicked because we're going to show something in red. Well, the fact of the matter is there was turnover, or there was an unexpected thing happen. That's all legitimate. That makes the plan reality. That makes the plan alive. You need to be okay with mistakes, with challenges, with issues, things that you deal with every day. But this is not one of those situations where there should be pressure put on the staff or the executive director to make sure that everything is green and a go status, because the fact of the matter is that's just not realistic. So what you're starting to talk about is the relationship between ED staff and board as a real kind of strategic partnership, rather than a kind of a more traditional hierarchical dynamic where you're, certainly you give your reports, but this is something sort of entirely different, where the reality is there and you can't be afraid to express it, and you've got a board full of strategic thinkers and people passionate that are going to help you and advise you in moving forward. Yeah, communication's key. So, what happens is, whether you have a board meeting, 6 times a year or 4 times a year, or whatever the case may be, the fact of the matter is that board member a lot of times is not thinking about you during the in-between times, or only about a specific thing, like based on a committee that person's serving on. So what happens then, if the communication's not open, then you start presenting this as a report, and then all of a sudden you've got board members jumping in wanting to know this or wanting to know what happened here, what happened there. The fact of the matter is some of that should have already been communicated. So this, again, open communication is, I got to tell you, is absolutely the key to a good strategic plan with all stakeholders involved. There shouldn't be anything here that everybody doesn't have a hand in, from my perspective. So, well said. So you can see it's actually a pretty simple thing, and you know, you can make a particular objective. You could use 2 pages, or you could use 1 page. I would keep it as simple as possible, because the more detail that you put in there, the more detail a lot of times people want. And the fact of the matter is, this is just a way of keeping on track and making sure that you're moving forward. So let's kind of take a look then at some guidelines around the playbook. So now you've kind of looked at the sample. So I think each one of these are pretty important. We've touched on these in the past. But spend time on defining the organization. If you're going to spend time somewhere, spend it on that positioning statement and on audience segmentation. So like if you're in a not-for-profit world where unearned is a big piece of what's happening, then spend time on your audience in terms of recognition, what's your relationship with those people, etc. It's really important to understand that. It's really important to have conversations what their perspective is on. And a lot of times, if you hear their perspective, the positioning statement will really come alive. Because like I'll use the Friends of Epley as an example. As I was facilitating that day retreat that we had, that we spent all the time on positioning statement and a few other things. But all of a sudden I found out that at least half of the volunteers had cancer. I mean, they had a real connection with what was going on there. There was a real passion that showed up there. That's where the positioning statement really got a life of its own. So it's really important to do that audience segmentation. Second of all is reach consensus. Consensus does not mean unanimous. Consensus means that in general, everybody's kind of on board with the objectives, and someone might like to add a word here or there, but the fact of the matter, everyone said, yeah, these are the 3 or these are the 5 things that I think are the most important thing that we should be doing over the next 2 years. Keep it simple. You know, make sure that everyone's sitting going like, yeah. And if someone says, yeah, but I really feel strongly about this, then have a conversation around that, but then come back to, okay, is there consensus about adding 1 more objective, or do we really need it? So that's really important, I think, because that's where you're going to have trust, all the intangibles. So you're going to have trust, people are going to feel empowered, people are going to work together in a more of a collaborative way. We talked about this one, minimalized objectives, focus on key issues. Here's one that always surprises me, is that I'll look at someone's playbook and they don't have any verbs. You know, everything's nouns. And so I would encourage you, it sounds silly, but when you get to the actions, make sure they start with a verb.
That seems intuitive. You know, similar to advice that people will give you when you're developing your resume. What did you do? Start each line with a verb.
Yeah.
You know, working is doing. You know, organizations are doing. Planning is doing. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
The way to express doing is through verbs.
Yeah, it always cracks me up. I say that because I probably did the same thing when I started in my career. Next one is keeping time in general. We talked about this, quarterly, season, and there might be seasonality that works better for you. If you're on a July calendar year versus a January calendar year, et cetera. Excuse me. Make sure that your seasonality fits with your planning process. The worst thing you can do is make the planning process part of your busiest time of year. You know, so make it work for you in terms of timing. Add visuals. We talked about this. Pictures related to mission objectives. And then lastly, keep it simple and alive. Change it when issues are opportunities to impact it. This is not something that's locked in the concrete. You know, when you change it, it needs to again go back to the consensus thing that we really need to move a little bit different direction, or this isn't as important as it was. But it should be in a live document. So the traditional strategic plan, that's this big thing, is very hard to change. Where if you have a playbook, it's pretty easy to kind of maneuver back and forth.
That was a question that I had, and I've seen a couple of questions coming in about. One is how long, we said earlier that a traditional strategic plan can take months up to a year to develop, depending on the size of the organization and the number of stakeholders and the process set in place. What do you think is a reasonable amount of time in developing a playbook? And then again, how set in stone is the playbook, and how often should its components, including the positioning statement, be revisited?
Yeah. The positioning statement should only be revisited if there's really a change in your direction, because that's really your consistency. Back to the timing, I'm sorry. I don't have a fast answer for that question. It really depends upon, I'll be quite honest with you, it depends on how engaged the executive director. In my mind, the executive director and the staff should be able to have maybe a retreat. Everybody goes back, writes their pieces, you go back and have another retreat, and you end up with a good draft. I mean, because you all intuitively know, you guys know this, you know what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So it has more to do with putting it on paper and getting consensus internally. Then, how you bring in the board. Maybe the board is a retreat where you present a draft and you have a facilitated conversation around that. Or maybe the board comes in and the positioning statement becomes the central part of their involvement at the front end. But ultimately, the board is also going to have to say, yeah, we agree with that. So you're going to have some kind of approval process. Depending on how your board's put together, that will dictate probably the thing. But in my mind, you should be able to do this in a couple of months.
And it sounds like you can cut a significant amount of time out by starting with the staff who have their ears to the ground and they're out in the field every day. Have them start it, and you can get yourself worlds away.
Absolutely.
In a short amount of time.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of our guidelines. So bottom line, what's the advantages? So it keeps everyone focused on key objectives. It creates metrics for moving forward with consensus. Good document for staff meetings. To me, this is more important for the staff to use than it is even with the board. Excuse me. Thanks, Todd. But it does become a great board report, and it keeps board members informed and focused. Every board that I've used a playbook with a client, they love it because it's easy to see. They move with it. They know where things are going, and minimalizing board anxiety, is not a bad thing. It makes for life a better life. Good performance evaluations. So if I'm an executive director and I've got my staff working on this, and there's some ownership within those strategies and how we're doing, that becomes part of how you would measure their performance. And the same thing with the board in terms of the executive director. Here's the playbook. This is what you said you were going to do. And again, that's why it's important to have that communication open, because if the board's only seen the playbook once a year and you've had some struggles that they're not aware of, and all of a sudden you don't want to be talking about those at the performance time, you want to be talking about those as they happen. It's a great orientation tool. So when new staff, new board members come on board, they can quickly figure out what's going on in terms of activity and operations. And then lastly, also I want to make another point. If for fundraising, this becomes a pretty good tool for some of the funders who really want to know what's going on. This way, they really know where their money's going. They really understand the dynamics of what's happening. And lastly, it's a good marketing tool because it's got all the marketing pieces to it. Back to your point, Todd, in the beginning. So that would be, in my mind, the advantages of having a playbook approach to your strategic plan.
Excellent. We have a question that just came in that somebody wants to know if you decide to check in on your playbook annually or revisit it totally, what do you think a check-in looks like? And is it a different process than setting up your initial playbook?
So you're saying revisit the playbook to see if it's still relevant?
Yeah.
Again, I'm gonna be a little ambiguous because it depends on how dynamic your organization is. So if your organization has been going through a major move, like if you have a capital campaign going on or whatever, or if you're adding a new program, you might want to check it in and making sure it's relevant on a very frequent basis, because what you thought was going to happen and what actually happened could have been two different things. So if something dynamic is going on in your organization, I would keep that thing alive big time. If you're in a pretty steady Eddie kind of mode with your organization where things aren't moving around a lot, things are looking pretty good, then it could be a quarterly or semi-annual or annual. Yeah, I could see where annually you have a retreat and say, okay, this is kind of where we're at, is it still relevant? So again, I think it just depends kind of how dynamic your organization is.
Excellent. So we've reached the end of the formal presentation, and we'd like to open it up now for questions, clarifying points.
Yep. And whatever anybody would like to ask, be happy to.
Okay. Here's a question. Who's the best person to keep this updated? The ED, another director, or should you look for an individual with a specific skill set?
ED.
All
right, all you executive directors, I really think that if you incorporate a playbook in your organization, that this is the executive director's playbook. I mean, I apologize to all of you that hate sports analogies, but the fact of the matter is, the executive director is the coach, and this is the playbook on how we're going to operate, where we're going, how we're going to get there. And so in my mind, it is the executive director's job to make sure that it is relevant.
What do you think about incorporating the playbook into your staff meetings?
I would use it for my staff meetings. A lot of times staff meetings, all these years of experience, it's great. All my hindsight, it's awesome. But anyway, my experience with my, being a employer, being the head of a department, et cetera, what dawned on me is how many meetings I held that were report meetings. And I look back at those going like, wow, what a waste of time, using a meeting to kind of, the playbook, if it's up to speed, everybody doing their part becomes the report meeting. So if that becomes the front end, then you really can focus on what's working and what's not working. Because in my mind, that's what the playbook allows us to do. If you're really on top of the gaps and issues and the actions and where we are status-wise, then that becomes a really relevant document for everybody to have a meeting around. So I would use it just for every meeting.
Our newest question has to do with responsibility and accountability in the playbook, and I can't remember now on the chart slide. Is there a section where you're assigning responsibility and sort of maintaining accountability in the playbook?
I think that's directly related to what the strategies are.
Mm-hmm.
So if the strategy is a board strategy, then the board needs to own the strategy or the action. But that, again, I'd make sure that's very clear. If you have a board whose primary function by bylaws is to raise money, and you have an objective around unearned income, then the board needs to be involved in how that's all going to work, and someone on that board needs to own it. And again, I would go to whoever, obviously the fundraising, if you have a development committee, would be that on the development committee.
So as you develop the playbook, identify the gaps and devise some actions for filling those gaps, they can then be assigned to both staff and board.
Yes. Sort
of everybody's in the mix.
But the board, I think, you got to be careful that the board is not getting assigned operational strategies. Mm-hmm. I know we've all seen board creep where board members have a tendency because it might be their own passion. They might have all the great intentions in the world, but the fact of the matter is they're too wrapped up in operations. So don't let the playbook get board members wrapped up in operations. that would be something that would just be a piece of advice from me. However, if there's a specific action where the board it has to operate, then that should be the case.
And the exception to that might be that if you have if it's an all-board organization, you have no paid staff, then obviously all of the action is going to be taken on by the board and operational.
Yeah, and I've done that before with the Friends of Omaha Library, not Friends of Omaha Library, Omaha Library Foundation. So sometimes when you're working with foundations, you'll get into that.
We have a follow-up question about incorporating the playbook into the staff or board meetings. Do you recommend starting the meetings off with a look at the playbook and then letting discussion come from the playbook, or do you, what makes sense to you in incorporating?
I think the playbook it can be used both ways. It can be used almost as a discussion outline, because of the nature of it. That's how I've used it in the past. But the fact of the matter is it could also just be part of it. There's other things you need to talk about in meetings. So you don't want for it to maybe dominate the conversation if you need to talk about something that's outside the playbook. So I think, again, that just depends on what the intention of the meeting. Maybe a point to be made there, again, based on my experience, and I didn't used to do this, and I finally started doing it a few years back, is when you have a meeting is to really write down what's the intention of the meeting. And staff meeting might not be the intention of the meeting. The intention of the meeting is that we need to do this, or we need to review the playbook, or we need to do something else. So I think, going into the meeting, being very intentional becomes very important.
Excellent.
Thanks, all of you that are sending in questions. We appreciate that very much.
Now, I have a question. One conflict I've seen in some planning processes is that there are different approaches for people involved in the same process. So some people might approach the process thinking that, well, we'll start with the mission statement and the values statements, and then we'll let our actions come from there. And that will guide us to an end. Other people come with the end already in mind, and they want to kind of retrofit a mission and vision and value statements to sort of meet that end. How do you reconcile those probably two different approaches in a single planning process? And is the playbook, is developing a playbook the kind of thing that can help that?
Personally, I don't think that's a playbook issue. I really think that's a planning issue.
Okay.
So in my mind, again, I probably should say this. A traditional strategic planning process is great. If you have the time and the resources and to make that all happen, then that's okay. The playbook is nothing more than a document to make it relevant to day-to-day operation. So that being said, in my mind, audience segmentation and positioning statement is the first thing you do, even if you have a different idea, because it's going to create the right conversation. So if your original purpose as an organization was to serve this particular geographic area, and you've been having conversations with other people and found out that really we should be moving to another community, and so you go back into the positioning statement. If you start with the positioning statement, why are we moving away from where we were? Why do we feel like the need to go to a different geographic area? So in my mind, the positioning statement creates the right context for somebody to take a look at the future.
Excellent. We have another question coming in. I think we'll have good news for you. The question is, where can I purchase the playbook, and does it come with a PowerPoint template?
This is free. It is our PowerPoint presentation. So this will be accessible to all of you. Todd will take care of that, and you can download it and use it. Again, I will tell you, it's just PowerPoint with the table inserted into it.
Do you want people to contact you for a copy, or would?
No. I think you can link it up. I'm happy, by the way, to that point. If you have any questions following, this webinar, feel free to reach me at askbob@culver.com. I'll be happy to answer your questions, and if you want to dig deeper into something, or if there was a question that you really were relevant or very specific to your organization, I'd be happy to do that. So feel free to contact me at that email address.
Excellent.
But Ty will make sure that you all have this template.
Sure. As a follow-up to this presentation, I'll send everybody a link to the recording, and it'll include all of the audio, this discussion, along with the PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll also be sending out a PowerPoint template that Bob is going to supply. And I'll follow up also with Bob's contact information, so that if anybody has some questions related to the playbook, you can reach out to him. Do you have any final comments, Bob, or are there any final questions?
Well, I do have a final comment, Todd.
Okay.
First of all, I just want to thank Nam and you personally. I think that what Todd and Nam are doing with these webinars is just right on the money, and I think that you as an organization bring such great value to our not-for-profit organizations in the Midlands, and I'm just happy to be part of this. So thank you for inviting me, and I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we want to thank you also for coming out and sharing your expertise, your years of wisdom and experience in planning processes. And I know all of your board service and all of your marketing and all of your planning experience has come together in this concept and in this presentation. So we're just delighted to have you. And actually, meeting one person means meeting another good person, which is how we're going to segue into next month's presentation. I asked Bob if he knew who is a great person to speak to us about governance issues, and he recommended Terry Ferguson. So next month, February 28th, the webinar series will cover nonprofit governance, a blessing, a curse, or both. And Terry is going to take us through some real-life governance scenarios, ask some pretty hard questions like, how did we get here? How do we deal with them? And how do we prevent them from arising in the future? It's going to be very interactive, and I think there are going to be some very, very practical situations. So please tune in with us in February, and I'll be sending out an invitation to everybody to make sure that you join us. And if there are no final questions, we will close down the webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please stand by.